Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are joined by former Captain Daniel Wheeler, who's the current president of Sunbelt Design and Development. Daniel recently bought a business. He's going to walk us through that process of selecting a business to buy and talk us through what it's been to transition and lead a business that was bought just on the precipice of the pandemic. So, Daniel, thanks for joining us today. If you could, please start off by telling us a little bit more about the business and yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This is cool what you have going on
Yeah,
here.
appreciate it.
Sunbelt Design and Development, we closed 3 March of this year. So, right in the mouth of this, of the beginning of this wild world that we find ourselves in now. Which we'll touch on that here in a little bit.
Yeah.
But we're ground support equipment manufacturer to all of the large primes, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, BAE, Leidos, and all of the services, so the Army, Navy, Air Force, providing very core operating type line items to the DoD. Very very core function requirement from the DoD. So a nice little niche market that goes on regardless of pretty much whatever else happens in the world. So
just for our listeners, DoD is Department of Defense.
Yeah.
Sounds like you guys are an aerospace manufacturing company.
Yes, we do a lot of short run build to print job shop type work, fixtures, missile containers and tow bars, slings, different engine stands and hoists, and you name it, we'll make it for you. If it's got a print, or we can design it and we can build it and get it out the door. So that's our core function where we're at right now.
And so all of the internal capability, manufacturing capabilities, and
yeah,
source raw materials.
Yeah, so we source our materials, comes in the front here. We've got a couple guys on various saws. So we generally first step, cut the materials, move it through the shop. We have in-house welding. We have quite a few CNCs out there on the floor of all different sizes and different capabilities. That'll move through the shop, and we've got a couple of paint booths and assembly facilities, and then ship out the back door. Kind of end-to-end solution here.
Nice. And you're located in San Antonio, Texas.
San Antonio, Texas, pretty near downtown.
Absolutely. And how many employees do you have?
50, right at 50.
Wow.
So we're
nice.
Yeah.
Appreciate the overview of the business. Talk us through a little bit about the process of identifying Sunbelt and what made that an attractive target for you.
Yeah. And I guess I'll back up a little bit to provide some context, because this is a very non-traditional way, I think, of coming at this thing. While I was in the military, still in active duty, I knew I was getting out, knew I was going to hit the exit after the completion of that tour that I was on. I was living in Germany at the time. Knew that I wanted to do my own thing. The options were coming out of the military, or either go to school or go to industry, or it's pretty defined paths. And so for me, it was either MBA and kind of MBA. But that wasn't super exciting. So I wanted to do my own thing. Came across the search fund concept, which is, for those that don't know, is effectively a fundless sponsor, an independent sponsor, acquisitive entrepreneurship, whatever you want to call it. There's an infinite number of permutations to approach this and to structure these deals, but effectively a fundless sponsor. Went deep down the Google rabbit hole, all the Stanford literature, the Harvard literature, just really ate that up, got excited about it. Was far more appealing than going back to school, coming out of the military. Didn't know which way was up when I first, this had to have been late 2015, when I first, started figuring this out. Really industry agnostic, no real, sense for what made sense or what I could credibly sell to an investor to back me on,
Hmm.
which we'll get into in a little bit here. It's vitally important to have a credible position when you approach this, which lesson learned, 5 years in the past here. So approached that, went through a number of different industries, a number of different ways, very brute force in nature, right? So very, there wasn't a lot of finesse to it, as far as you'll see folks hire interns or go through this subscribe to all these databases or do all these other things that mine was very brute force, right? Just a lot of time, a lot of manual effort, and a lot of persistence, to sort of work through my thinking about how to approach getting something done.
Question for you on that.
Yeah.
So, and it may have just been serendipitous, right? So, Air Force captain in a aerospace manufacturing business, dealing in spaces where it makes sense.
Yeah.
For someone who doesn't know the journey in between, it seems like the natural choice and fit. And so, when you said you were industry agnostic, what were you looking for? Like, what was?
So I'll give you an example. The first business I looked at was a RV service and repair business.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I took it to some investors. Like, it was a good business, a very niche market. Probably not a whole lot of growth upside in something like that.
Right.
But it was a good business. The financials were strong. Had a great reputation. It had a great facility and good team already there working. And so it was positioned to been around for like 37 years at that point. It was a very strong business. But when I took it, I was real excited, took to a couple of investors, and they said, "Hey, great. Why would you be the guy to run an RV service and repair business?"
Right.
And so that helped. Well, it made me stop and say, well, it's a good point. Like, why would I be the guy to run an RV service and repair business? What do you know about the RV industry? Well, nothing. And so that helped me get my head in a different position, sort of have an honest bit of self-reflection about what I knew,
Right.
what I could credibly say that I knew. And it was all, my background's all military, right? All defense and acquisition and strategic planning and finance, and it's all defense related.
Right.
So that distilled pretty quickly into, where I thought that I could credibly bring something to the table.
Got it. Excellent. No, and thank you for that clarification. Some of our audience here have heard from some other speakers around the search fund model, and I think your approach of looking and doing the inventory, or having the investors prompt you to do the inventory of what value you would ultimately bring to the business, and then narrowing your search is a real critical point, and I think really important for buyers and for sellers as well, as they're looking for the next person to take over the business, to understand that there's got to be a story around what makes the future owner a credible person to be able to lead that business into the future.
Yeah. And now I will say, it's complicated, but so much of this, it is not rocket science, right? Like, this is not, I'm not splitting the atom here when we,
right.
When we approach, it's leading people, it's getting people to rally around some sort of shared goal, coaching up the culture, coaching up, people that have probably had little to no professional management, professional sort of guidance and high expectation and the setting of standards. And that's in the general sense. In almost all of these closely held legacy family oriented businesses that have been around for forever, right about the same size, they're trucking along, doing great. The owner's probably taken off. It's the American dream, right? But you come into a place like this, there's a huge effort, kind of regardless of what the company is, to professionalize and coach up and put a lot of um, sophistication, and not really that, but a lot of business 101 type processes in place while rallying the people and coaching up talent to hopefully meet whatever that vision is.
Yeah.
That's
I'm gonna
kind
and I'm gonna put a placeholder on that, because I think first I'd like to acknowledge that that is non-trivial, to come in and lead and create a culture of performance and success, and want to get your perspective more deeply on that in this organization. I don't want to gloss over it, but I do want to make sure we go back and finish up kind of your journey
yeah,
on identifying the business and what
yeah,
made that decision for you.
yeah. So Sunbelt, uh, in this market size, there's a lot of crap, right? There's just a lot of kind of business. My outlook going through this was, some businesses just shouldn't exist, and some should, and that's sort of like sort of the ultimate capitalistic kind of free market view on it, right? But you look at, and I'm sure you've looked at enough of these that you see some businesses that probably just shouldn't change hands and have been great, but aren't going to be able to function um, apart from the founder or in the market that they are in, the segment that they are in, and that's fine. But so that was my outlook, sorting through kind of what was out there, how I approached business owners that I had identified, or how I looked through the aggregated website listings of brokers. And so it's sort of two angles to finding it: was businesses that were not for sale and businesses that were listed, Biz Buy Sell or BizQuest or any of these other hundreds of websites that put them out there. So going through that, this was actually listed by a mutual friend, a guy that we both know, and he was great to work with and super helpful in getting the deal done. But Sunbelt made sense. It was a business I knew, highly fragmented market, just an enormous amount of people in this space, a very blue collar, very dirty, kind of unsexy in the Warren Buffett sense of unsexy industries that put cash off, and so it was attractive from that angle. It had been around for 30 years. It had viable, defensible operations. It was in a segment that was not, it was wide open, just very unsexy, below the line, just wide open, right? And so there was no, like, the Wild West and kind of in that sense. And so it was very attractive to me in a space that I knew, that I could sort of come into and understand and move forward, move the ball down the field on growing it and taking it somewhere,
So share a little bit. So you mentioned things like defensible operations, the industry dynamics of being in a fragmented space, where there's opportunity to come in and take share, big enough space, right, where you can grow the business. What are some of the other factors? So you and I both do have a sense and idea of what makes a good business, and what are businesses that aren't so attractive. But talk about some of the other factors that you may have looked at as you kind of went through that process.
Yeah. So once I'd identified Sunbelt, it was a matter of going through. Um, a lot of this is very DoD specific and doesn't kind of apply outside of that. But there's things that you make, the parts that we manufacture, the products that we produce. Taking those, going on open government source databases and pulling out the different procurement data was kind of that first step in understanding the market that I was playing in.
Mm-hmm.
It's not attractive if you buy a $20 million company in a market that is 25 million, right? That's not attractive at all. But it is very attractive to buy a $5 or $10 million company and you are, 1/2000th of the annual kind of, which is where we were at. Went through, added it all together, went through the Navy procurement data, the justification books that Congress goes through the subcommittees, all this kind of very um, nerdy governmental procurement stuff. But it gave a sense of the size of the market that we were in, and seeing that we were, just a fragment of the broader market, and that no one, I mean, there's some guys out there, but there's not really just a massive dominator in the space. um, it was right up my alley, right? That's kind of step one. You want to know that you are there. There's a space for you to play, a space for you to be competitive, and a meaningful upside that you can grow through a little bit of sophistication and ambition and luck. Trying that you can grow into there. So that was kind of the first step, and um, you start thinking about, specifically to this, the customer that you're serving. Well, our customer is ultimately the Department of Defense, the United States government, probably the greatest customer, on the planet, right? The most reliable customer that you could possibly have would be the United States government. There's very little risk of that customer failing, and which is pretty unique to this space that we're playing in. So that that got me comfortable again at a high level, and having been on the other side, also was pretty comfortable at a high level there. Then going through the operations and understanding why customers used us, why, what sort of advantage did we have, relative to the other Sunbelts of the world,
Right.
that we could identify and start looking at.
What was that? So what was that advantage that you saw?
Yeah, we did a lot of customer calls during the due diligence process, and I did some visits to go to different military bases and spoke to them, and there was very high regard for Sunbelt's past performance. Been around 30 years, very reliable, on time. Um, um, to spec, as the contract dictated, which is basic stuff, right? There's a lot of just basic things that you're supposed to do when you run a business and when you operate, you serve a customer. But as I've learned the last 5 months and 8 days now, or 5 months and 10 days now at this point, a lot of people are not there to do the basic stuff. It's been extremely surprising as dealing with these customers, just how many people completely and totally disregard being on time, doing what you say you're going to do. And so that's the sort of value from an art stance, that we were kind of bringing to the table there. And then there was there's real benefit in having end-to-end kind of all the capabilities in one spot. You can step up in this of service attitude to work through different tolerances and specs and design flaws, and because you have it on the machine, you see flaws start to develop, and you can come back and collaboratively work with your customer to solve them, right? And this very easy of service attitude was a pretty strong bent to why people used firms like Sunbelt. There's more than just Sunbelt that does that, but that was a differentiator again in that space.
No, that's cool, and I appreciate you sharing the perspective and the context of what you did in Diligence. I come from an aerospace background, so we've chatted about that, and there are certain organizations that have a culture around the commitments. They're customer-centric is a term that we used in a previous life, and things like on-time delivery, understanding first pass yield, and making sure that product is going out quality, no returns. And again, I like to highlight that for our audience as non-trivial. To create a business and a system that delivers that consistently takes work and effort. And so kudos to you for recognizing that and being able to find a business that already had the foundational legacy around some of those key metrics that customers value in that space.
Yeah.
Anything else? I mean, the team comes to mind for me as an area that's of critical importance in businesses as you're going through the acquisition process. How's the
Yeah.
team?
And my partner in this, another guy you might want to interview, he, extremely principled, intelligent guy, and the advisors that we had as we worked through this, definitely doesn't happen, without sort of the dumb luck to kind of build these relationships and step into the right situation to. This deal definitely would not have happened without that. Yeah, you cannot do this without the right team. I don't know, maybe you can, but I couldn't have done this without the right team and partner and working through all of these steps to get this deal done. No way it happens.
Got it. And so to me, part of that is the scale, right? And so you're able to. What's your some measure that we could use to help give a sense of the size of your business? What's the?
So let's call it sub 20 north of 5.
Okay. So if we look at a business of that range, right? Like there's one thing to try to get into a business that's 500,000 and there are individuals that can step into that type of an organization maybe on their own. You've been able to lever up and essentially step into a bigger business in a bigger space, which gives you a huge opportunity on the upside. And that's what it takes the team to do. So for those individuals who are out there considering ways to get into business acquisitions, there are definitely different avenues. And it sounds like you went down one where you're able to find team members and financial backers to help get into a bigger business. We're able to have a bigger impact through the work that you do. So
yeah,
that's great. Can you talk a little bit about advice that you would give to sellers? So you're in this unique position of you've gone through the process as a buyer, and you're now sitting in the president's chair. And if you have the opportunity to talk to other sellers who are preparing to make that transition, what would be the advice that you would give to those individuals?
Again, basic 101, but books got to be right. Grounded in reality.
Yeah.
If you're about to sell it, it's step one. Like if it doesn't make sense from a financial perspective, there's very little in the way of magic that you can just bring out to make it make sense, right? It just has to make sense. And so
30 seconds on that. I'm going to throw out there for our audience. I'm working with a CFO to put together a session on balance sheets. So I know a lot of owners look at profit and loss statements, P&Ls, but we're working on providing some insight around the balance sheet. But when you say the financials, what are you looking for? What does an owner need to get right in their financials?
You have to, one, you have to have financials, I guess. Just without assuming, you have to have financials. But two, it has to be grounded in some sort of basis of fact, right? Like what you show on your P&L, on your balance sheet. It's all, if it's not grounded, if it's not defensible, then like you're undermining any position you take as far as an asking price or any sort of terms and negotiation that you start structuring a deal around. It's just got to make sense.
Right.
And that's probably I've looked at quite a few of these businesses before getting this deal done, and that's probably, if not the number one. I mean, there's a few number ones, but if it just has to make sense. I don't know how many other ways I can say that. It has to be around consultant, accountant, how you recognize revenue, how you account for assets, how you account for inventory. It's just got to make sense. And so anybody out there ready to sell a company, consult an accountant that has done this before and can help you clean your books up before you go to the table to sell. That's way too late to do it at that point. You got to do this, year or two in advance, cleaning up the books, getting some professional help, and making it as nice and defensible and clean. If it's not defensible, it's not clean. It just begs more questions and pulls more threads and undermines your position.
Clear value driver. Yep, and we've talked about that, and we will continue to talk about this. Thank you for your insights there. Other pieces of advice.
Yeah. Be honest, transparent as much as, always be honest, always be transparent, right? There's not really a caveat to that. Clear communication. Don't pull anything out at the 11th hour that completely throws a wrench in the deal. There's so much preparatory work that goes into preparing one of these companies for sale. Mixing of assets, personal expenses. It's pretty common in family, closely held family legacy businesses. So that's got to all get cleaned up. It get really one-on-one stuff, but most people skip the basics. So whatever, all the stuff is online and in books, but got to do the basics. Operations have to be clean, books have to be clean, clear processes and transparency around the workers, around the people that you employ, around the market you're in, around disclosures, right? That's all basic stuff, but stuff that gets neglected sometimes in this space, I think.
No, and the call out makes sense. It's what we try to do with our owners. Ideally, we have these conversations 2 years in advance, and we work with the owners to identify, here are the areas, and the books being one of them, looking at the organization and what they need to do in order to prepare it for sale. Very helpful insight. I did want to come back to the bookmark that we put on leadership and get your perspective on, again, in the president's chair, day one, on the precipice of a pandemic and potential shutdown. So you're dealing with this complexity of, it's a new business, new organization, and you've got these external factors that are also convoluting the transition. Talk us through that experience, and what do you think prepared you to be successful in navigating the organization through that?
Yeah. So there's no playbook for it. I'll tell you that. Kind of right off the bat, there's no, or at least in March, there was no how to navigate your business through a pandemic,
right,
in the self-help aisle at Half Price Books. And I don't know, maybe I've been wrong this whole time. A lot of this has been seat of the pants, kind of gut feel on working through it. But to me, the success in doing this with people is being very clear, setting a standard, holding a standard, setting expectations of high performance, holding those expectations of high performance, setting values, setting how you think about the world and how you think about where this company, where in this case our company fits into the world, and how and where you fit into that sort of spoke on the wheel there. It's a tough one, and it is very seat of the pants, very gut oriented. But I think if you tend towards honesty, transparency, about the world and about what's going on with your company, about what's going on with your business, and about some of the bumps in the road, people will respond to that. And in a very, I'm generally a pretty measured guy, right? I think that's very important, right, for doing this, and especially in this environment that we're in with a global pandemic and domestic issues and every other sort of crisis that seems to pop up every once a month near here now in 2020. Clear, transparent, even keeled, measured set of vision, drag people along with you, and not everyone will respond to that, and that's okay, right? You gives you a chance to fill your bench and fill your talent pool with the people that you want, and people that will respond to that. Yeah, and that's where we're at right now, I think.
Got it. Any big surprises or key lessons learned over the last 5 or 6 months since you've taken over?
Where do you want me to start?
Sounds like there'll be an episode 2 to this conversation.
Yeah. Look, I went into this with, in hindsight, very little expectation about what it would be, which was probably good.
Yep.
I didn't know I didn't know that until reflecting on this, a month or two back, that I didn't really have hard and fast expectations about what would happen, how this would play out, how successful it would be. I mean, you have upsides and base case and downsides and all that. You can model that all out. But just for me, and I think that helped probably, right? It allows for, you don't know what you don't know, right? Coming into this, and you can go through diligence and you can model it to death, and you can model every risk scenario, every downside scenario, everything that can go wrong, everything that can go right, but ultimately, day one you sit in the seat and the situation's changed. Now you start, now everyone comes to you, everyone tells you all the problems, everyone tells you all the things that you just didn't get in diligence.
Right.
You were there, that you may not even realize were relevant or valuable to get during diligence. And so the game completely changes day one, minute one, as soon as you sit in the seat. And that's what I found here, not least of which the very next Monday we were in, the city of San Antonio says they're going to shut down for coronavirus. But setting all that aside, just running the business, people bring you their problems, being the problems of the business, bring you all of the operational issues that you were not in the position during diligence to really understand how significant or insignificant they were, right, until you're in the seat, and then it hits you square in the face about, something you underweighted was way more significant than you gave it credit for. And then the thing you were worried about is, was no big deal at all. And focused on, worried about, modeling out wasn't really a big deal at all. So lots of surprises, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But nothing, really still nothing that undermines the thesis for why we pulled the trigger on this. A lot of things that I wish I'd known and wish I had understood on the front side, but none of it really gets at the core of and changes the thesis and the approach of what my perception of the value of this company and the capability and the potential upside by taking it over.
And I'd like to point out 2 things in there, right? So I think there's one of strategy, and encourage all, whether it be sellers, an operator, a buyer, to understand the overall strategy of what you're trying to accomplish. Because to your point, if you got some clarity around what's the very big picture, and there's a lot of opportunity for volatility kind of on the journey, but as long as the business is on the right track in the right direction, it allows the business kind of weather that. You talked about uncertainty and scenario planning and being flexible. Your leadership, and which is why I wanted you to highlight it and kind of talk through the stories, again, non-trivial, to be even keeled through that level of volatility, to be able to show up as a steady hand with a clear destination for the team is paramount to anybody who's leading in any environment. But it becomes ultra critical when there's higher uncertainty or you're in a scenario where there's external pressures like a pandemic. So kudos to you on that. Appreciate you spending time with us this afternoon. I'll give you the opportunity to share any last thoughts. And again, I'm going to invite you back because I think there's a lot more to unpack that the audience can benefit from. So congratulations, first of all, on completing the deal, the first 6 months, and continued success in the future. But give you the last word on any final thoughts for our audience.
If you're out there and you are contemplating buying a company, just do it. Just do it, right? I get so many calls every week from folks that reach out to me and want to chat for 30 minutes about how can they buy a company, how can they go find a company and close a deal and get it done. And so many of these guys are super smart, super intelligent, but I would put it at, less than 1% of people that actually follow through and close the deal, find something, take action, move it forward, get it down the field, get it across the finish line, and get it done. I mean, this is not a riskless proposition. No one else can validate your decision to do it or not. This is a lonely environment. You're going against the grain, and when you decide to do something like this, and it is not easy for sure, but it's very easy to get paralyzed by sort of the analysis piece of this and look for the exact right perfect company, and then you just wind up not doing a deal at all, and you've spent 2 years looking at companies and a lot of good deals pass you by and you just wind up not doing the deal at all. So that's probably the number one thing that I convey to most of these guys and when I get reach out for advice and have conversations like that. So just go out there and do it.
Excellent. And on that note, thank you everyone for joining us, and stay tuned for our next episode.